welcome to HoloTalk, the internet radio broadcast for lasers and holography, enjoyed by listeners throughout the world. I'm Frank DeFreitas, and I'll be your host for each installment, bringing you news, guests, and everything holographic. Now, please enjoy the latest show.
Paul Barefoot.
Hi, Paul. How are you? It's Frank DeFreitas.
Well, hello there. How are you?
How are you doing? Driving back to Connecticut, I hear.
I am indeed.
I thought I'd give you a call and see what we could do about putting the show up and having you on the show.
Okay.
I have one of the shows up already with Michael Anderson, but I can always put this one up in addition to that and then send out another email blast to the subscribers.
Okay. That sounds good.
So everything's set up and ready to go, I take it?
I went in just to sort of lay the show out. You laid the show out this morning and last evening, and they're going to finish the lighting today. But primarily this is our Nature of Holography show, which is it's our Nature of Holography 2. We have two shows which we circulate, essentially the same content. One show is bigger than the other. The show in Reading is I guess, image-wise, probably a little over 45, 50 images.
Wow.
And they're packed pretty tightly in that show. But it's a nice little show. It's sort of an introductory to holography using images from nature. Mm-hmm. And it goes through and talks about their panels or historical a timeline, which is sort of drawn from our website on the history of holography. And then the images are there to sort of show people how holography is different than other media, like photography, of course, and drawings and paintings. There's a nice little section called the Natural Collection, which has 12 embossed holograms using a variety of different embossing techniques. Embossing being what you see, of course, on the National Geographic or your MasterCard and Visa cards.
Yeah.
And each one of those images are from nature, and they show how they show the exact same object done as a hologram, and then as a photograph, or as a pen and ink drawing, or as an embossed image.
Oh, that's a nice touch.
Yeah, and so there are 12 of them, and there's 12 different images, and each showing holography versus another type of representation, which is nice. It might be particularly interesting to graphic art students who are dealing in such matters. So that's essentially the show. It's got one of the old-time favorites, of course, Kiss 2 by Lloyd Cross.
Yeah.
Which I just had to add in there. It's the only integral or holographic movie that we have in there.
Okay.
But it's such a classic. Everything else is reflection pieces and embossed pieces, which, of course, are the transmission mirror back.
I imagine it must be a number of pieces from Richmond Holographics.
There are, because they produced a ton of those.
Yeah.
So Greg Cherry is in there, and Edwina Orr, but your Richmond Holographics is definitely in there because they have some great images.
Yeah. You don't happen to have Lindau Man in there, do you?
Well, I have it in the other show.
Oh, okay.
And I was looking around to see if I could find another copy. I didn't want to break up the other show because the other show goes down to Museum of Science in Daytona Beach.
Okay, that's another question I wanted to ask you, because there are a number of listeners in Florida that I told there would be a show down in Florida, and they were just curious. Why don't you, while I have you on the phone, I don't want to hold you up because I know you have a long drive.
That's all right.
Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about the Florida show, too?
Well, let's edit this out because I don't have my notes in front of it.
All right. Any dates or anything? Months?
Well,
ballpark?
I'm looking for those right now.
That's all right. The Richmond, just out of curiosity for the holographers who are listening to the show, the Richmond holographic pieces, are they on glass plate or film? Are they the film?
They're all on film.
They're all on film. Okay.
Yeah, we found that to be the best thing to use because traveling this stuff around glass is break down pretty easily.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to do a presentation during the month, and what I'm going to do is, I don't know if anyone spoke to you about it, but I'll be taking a few photographs of a few selected holograms and then telling the stories behind the holograms.
Oh, that's nice.
As part of the presentation.
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting, on our website, there's a handwritten note or series of pages by Lord Cross, which you might want to take a look at. I found it fascinating, him talking about the early days of the San Francisco School of Holography.
Yeah.
But the KISS would be a fascinating talk about that as well, because it just goes there. It's a classic image. It's just a great image. Everybody loves it.
Well, it's Super Bowl weekend that it opens on, so if anybody's a holographer and they like the Super Bowl, what a weekend that would be. You can go to the holography exhibit on Saturday and watch the Super Bowl on Sunday.
That's right. And, of course, they're open for, I think this show goes through April.
April 29th, yeah.
Right, so there's plenty of time to see it, and there's plenty of other things to see at that museum, too. I didn't realize that. That's a great museum down in
Oh, isn't it? That's a beautiful museum. They actually had a holography exhibit there 20 years ago.
I know, and I've forgotten who produced that.
Yep, and the name that Doug. No,
Doug Tyler? No, he didn't. No. He wasn't doing it then. But I'm not sure who.
Actually, I believe it from St. Mary's College or something like that. I think it was. Is that?
It could have been.
That's Doug Tyler, right?
That's right.
I actually wrote the review for that show at the Reading Museum. I'm not sure if anybody who's at the Reading Museum was there 20 years ago.
I don't think anybody remembers it.
Yeah, I wrote the review for that, and I actually had it out a while ago, and it was Doug Tyler who curated the show. And St. Mary's may be the wrong name of the college or whatever, but
I think you're right. I think you're right. But
it's tough remembering this stuff for 20 years or more anymore.
Tell me about it. We were at. You always tell me every time we talk that your first collection of holograms that you saw was at the Walnut Street Theater, which was when I was circulating the Museum of Holography through the Looking Glass, which is
absolutely
the inaugural show. We opened at the Walnut Street Theater.
Oh, really?
And that was our first show. Then we went to Montreal, and then we went down to to Raleigh, North Carolina, where that's where it started breaking attendance records. They had a one-day attendance record broken down there for that show. And the show didn't go. It was out for 10 years. Never came back to New York.
Isn't that something? I had one of the original posters from that show. It wasn't called Through the Looking Glass on the poster that they sold. It was actually called the Hologram Show.
Oh, really?
Yes. Admission was 50 cents for children, I believe, and $1 for adults. Mid-70s.
Right.
Yeah.
But then we took Looking Glass down to Adelaide, Australia, and then eventually it went over to the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. So it got around for it was a nice show, and it's sort of the basis, the same model that the nature of holography is, to show people who have never really seen a large collection of holograms.
Yeah.
What it looks like, what it's all about, and where it came from, and maybe a hint of where it's going.
Well, I owe you a great deal of gratitude for that show, because that's what's actually spurred me on. I mean, I saw my first hologram in '68, and it was something I always wanted to do, but right after I saw that show in Philadelphia, that's what cemented it. And then once I bought the house, the Holography Handbook in 1983 got me started with my own studio. So
there wasn't much written on holography back then.
No.
Any book that you could get a hold of was like gold.
I sat outside of that Walnut Street Theater in a parking lot waiting for it to open in a 1962 Wildcat. That we didn't have any heat in the car. And it was in the middle of winter, and we had to wrap ourselves in blankets because I think we had an hour and a half before it opened. A lot has changed since then.
That's for sure. So it looks like you're doing a lot of new stuff there at your studio.
I try to keep ahead of the curve, you know. Did you find out anything about the Florida show?
I haven't.
That's all right.
I haven't. I tell you what, I'm running around with limited files.
Don't worry about it. We'll get that information out to the listeners. One school in particular in Jacksonville was interested in it because they have holography as part of their program there.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
You know, I notice, on my site I get, site meters here to see where people come from, and it's just amazing the number of universities and colleges that send people to the history of holography. I guess just to sort of get them up to speed on where it came from. That's on our website.
That history page that you have is wonderful. I actually link over to that too. It's a wonderful history page.
And I keep adding stuff every once in a while. Unfortunately, most recently since Leith and passed on, and of course our guru Steve Benton.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to add to let people know about from the actual curator of the show?
Well, I think that's about it. I'll have to get back to you on those other dates.
I know you have a long trip back, but you were so close to my house.
Is that right?
Where are you right now?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm on Route 222 heading north.
Oh, okay.
I think I'm south of Allentown.
Yeah. Well, you're more than welcome to come by if you'd like to.
I might try that on the way down. I'm going to come down and break the show and then take it back to Connecticut.
All right, let's plan on that. We'll have a lunch or dinner.
All right, that sounds good.
Can either go out for dinner or I can cook. Either way.
You can cook?
Yeah, I can cook.
Well, I'm amazed.
It comes from mixing all the chemicals.
Yeah.
You just substitute herbs and spices and you're a cook. All right, Paul, I'll let you get back on the road.
All right, hey, thanks a lot.
Hopefully everything goes as planned for a big opening weekend.
All right, well, thanks again for your support and help there, Frank.
Oh, thank you. And look forward to seeing the show and look forward to seeing people during my presentation days. Take care, Paul. Thank you for calling. Bye.